We all remember that one scene from World War Z, but I doubt anyone remembers anything else from it. Honestly, the most interesting thing about this movie isn't what it is, but what it isn't. And what it isn't is World War Z, the book. Whereas the movie is a Brad Pitt disaster thriller flick in the same vein as 2012, the book is radically different. It's a series of interviews that explores the stories of various people during various stages of the zombie apocalypse. The book is less about one character and more about an expansive collection of narratives that gel together into one grand story. Now, I'm sure you can understand how that'd be difficult to portray in a film, considering the time and budgetary limitations. It is quite the Herculean task, as the kids say. One that would probably be better suited for a TV show a la The Last of Us. Fortunately, challenges really get my rocks off, so I'm tackling this behemoth. But I can only do so by radically altering a movie that already radically altered its source material. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take our budget and scrap everything else. And we're gonna perform our civic duty of honoring the source material via constructing an atypical movie. By splitting the narrative. Instead of one 2-hour-long movie about one story, we're gonna do 4 30-minute-ish mini-movies. That way we mirror the book's style while adapting it to a much shorter medium. Starting with... For our first story, we're within a sizable metropolis. Let's call it Redfield. We follow Jean, a member of a private security team for a prominent politician, Astrid. Our tale begins with Jean escorting Astrid to a bio-research facility for a demonstration of a new medical breakthrough. But upon arrival, Jean and her team quickly realize that something is amiss. And we witness the beginning of the end. Now I'm going to take a little detour and a little liberty here and amend the nature of our undead friends. Whereas the zombies in the OG movie were forces of nature that coagulated into floods to steamroll anything and anyone, I want the zombies in this movie to be unique. So let's segment them into 2 brackets. First, we have what we'll call ferals. They're your typical brain-dead brain eaters. They shuffle, they moan. They're only really a threat in large numbers or if you're cornered. We'll encounter them after time passes and the apocalypse endures. But what Jean and Astrid meet now are what we'll name reborns. These zombies are fresh out of the box, meaning a few things. First, they run, so threat level is automatically exponentially higher. But second, and more importantly, they think. These zombies have traces of humanity lingering within them while still being touched by the infernal hunger all these monsters suffer. So they can reason, plan, even use weapons, all to a very limited extent. They'll be the main drivers of the spreading infection, as we're about to witness. Jean and her team immediately withdraw from the facility with Astrid in tow. The team calls for an extraction, but Redfield is already starting to go under. The Reborn are as tenacious as they are insatiable, making the unsuspecting city ripe for slaughter, meaning Jean and Astrid will have to cross Redfield to reach an extraction point upon its edge. So we follow our heroes as they do a mad dash across a burning metropolis. One by one, Jean's team is whittled down by the Reborn, along with the fearful crowds of panicked civilians. But our plucky hero is determined to get her VIP to the extraction so Astrid can rally other politicians and be part of both retaking and reconstructing their lost city. The pair eventually make it to the extraction after much loss, managing not to get infected. Jean has lost every teammate along the way, but she's done it. So the two board one of the last choppers out of town.
It's over.
Astrid says then, relieved.
I'm done.
Jean looks at her, confused.
Done?
At which point, Astrid reveals that she's not going to rally with other officials to form a plan. She never was. She knows what was unleashed in Redfield, and she knows there's no stopping it. The project she and other senators funded was meant to be a weapon against their enemies, but will soon turn against the entire planet. So Astrid intends to hunker down within a personal bunker in order to outlast the hell she's created. Jean listens to this plan, considering all she's lost in one day, and all the rest of the world will lose in the days to come. Then she raises her gun.
Wait!
Our second story follows a gang that calls themselves the Children. Grant and Grace are both twins and low-tier criminals on the outskirts of Kennedy City when Armageddon hits. They and their boys manage to weather the initial onset of the apocalypse by retreating and ignoring those who need their help. But now that the first shockwave has passed and society is collapsing, Grace sees an opportunity. So she and Grant convince the Children to start taking territory. At this point, the infection has not atrophied the reborn into ferals yet, meaning the zombies are still dangerous even in low numbers. So the Children wield that to their advantage. They use the reborn against the scattered military forces trying to reestablish order, inciting battles to grind down their enemies before swooping in to finish them off and claim their supplies. During this expansionary period, Grant acts as a mitigating force against Grace, who is full of unbridled rage. The two perform a balancing act. Grace, who alongside her brother has endured an existence of unending strife, wants the world to feel the pain she has endured her whole life. Grant, on the other hand, wants to make a better world than the one he was born into by whatever means necessary. In other words, while the sister is a ruthless tactician and brutal dictator, the brother is a peacemaker and orator. Meanwhile, we discover a weakness the zombies have: terminal illness. Or rather, terminal illness in prey. See, Grant is sick, and has been before the apocalypse. He's dying, so the zombies have a natural aversion to his tainted flesh. Currently, this repulsion manifests in the reborn ignoring him unless he outright threatens or attacks them. But if he hypothetically were to encounter a feral, which don't really exist at this early stage of the world's end, he would be completely invisible to them. Anyway, our story closes out during the final stages of the Children solidifying control over their territory. The survivors of Armageddon's first wave are now bound to them, exchanging their labor for protection. But it's not enough for Grace, whose bitter spite is boundless. She feels cheated by a world that not only has robbed her of a decent life, but will soon rob her of her brother, leaving her alone with sycophants and backstabbers alike. So she invites the Children's highest-ranking members to a dinner, and she spikes all of their drinks, including her and her brothers, with infected DNA, transforming them all and destroying the world the Children built. Our next story begins with a burning village. A young woman, Hope, awakens in the aftermath of a bandit attack that has destroyed her people, immediately swearing revenge. And she has the means to accomplish it too, because she, as people call it nowadays, is a death walker. A terminal illness has affected her relationship with the infected, similar to Grant. But this story is years into the apocalypse and years after the Children imploded, which means ferals now roam the earth, often under the leadership of whatever reborn maintains enough sentience to lead their pack. In this infested landscape, Hope tracks down the outlaws who took everything from her, and aspires to take everything from them, by gathering a horde of zombies, then wielding them as a legion to attack the raiders' base. As a Deathwalker, Hope is essentially able to steer the horde in the direction she desires, and as a human, she's able to hone the reborns into instruments of destruction. So she stages a siege. Hope sends her Deadites to war, then storms in after them, slaying any who get in her way. And she manages not just to avenge her people, but rescue prisoners from the depths of the raider base. Once all is said and done and the sun rises, the compound belongs more to the dead than the living. The prisoners have escaped, and the outlaws have been consumed. So, Hope wanders onto a hilltop away from the carnage. And, with her purpose fulfilled, decides to send herself off.
Wait!
A stranger, no, an ex-prisoner, approaches. Despite his youthful appearance, he has extensive medical training. He's a doctor, or at least close to what the old world would have called a doctor, and he can potentially help her. Before Hope can respond, though, she notices more strangers. More prisoners, forming a group that intends to travel far from where they'd been kept. So when the doctor asks Hope if she's willing to join them, she makes her decision.
Yes.
Our last story is the furthest into the apocalypse. At this point, there's been a generation that hasn't known a world without zombies. It's been decades since the first infection, and society has reincarnated into a series of scattered city-states and belligerent factions. Ferals roam about, ever hungry, while survivors get by as nomads or build colonies under the protection of ruthless warlords. We follow Jaina, a lone wanderer who travels the land with her trusty sword, shield, and pistol. In this world, Jaina acts as a mercenary, and for that purpose, she is hired. Her client? A man named Julian who belongs to an order of nomadic doctors that study the plague. Julian claims to have made a breakthrough that could bring humanity one step closer to reclaiming their world. But there's a catch. First, the good doctor needs to reach the College of Medicine that is convening at a settlement miles from the remote way station he currently resides in. And second, our dear Dr. Julian has a bounty on his head. So ensues a cat-and-mouse chase as Jaina and Julian trek through the wilderness. They contend with bounty hunters, bandits, and zombies alike, fighting tooth and nail all the way, relying not just on their skills, but each other. This journey culminates in a climax wherein Jaina and Julian are pinned down by bounty hunters at the edge of the Free States. During the showdown, Julian creates a distraction to rescue Jaina, but in doing so is trapped by zombies. And while saving him, Jaina is bitten on the hand. Despite the wound, the two manage to fend their attackers off long enough for Free State troopers to arrive and save the day. But Jaina succumbs to her wounds, only to awaken later in a city-state facility, missing her left hand, but alive. Julian rescued her with some timely thinking, and a trusty sword. Jaina immediately decides that our dear doctor owes her a lot more for her mission, and he agrees as long as she sticks around. After all, by getting him here, and almost sacrificing herself to do it, she's given him and the world something it desperately needs. Hope. And thus concludes the saga of World War Z rewritten. I understand my version isn't completely faithful to the novel, but hope it still adheres to similar themes and vibes. Some of the stories are clearly darker than others, but I wanted to end on an aspirational note. Zombie movies rarely do. Side note, speaking of endings, here's a thought on the children. If you're wondering how Grant would turn out as a Deathwalker who was forcibly infected, I imagine he'd basically become a zonkey. No, not literally. By a zonkey, I mean he'd be sterile, since the infection would not want to use him as a vehicle of reproduction, and thus risk spreading his sickness to new hosts. That brings me to a few thoughts I had while making this. First, the stories spun today are disconnected, but I can imagine a reality where they were instead linked by characters. So Jean, the Spec Ops security guard from Genesis, could appear as a member of the military in The Children. Or the Doctor from Death Walking could be a younger version of Julian from The Swordslinger. Yay or nay on that concept? I could see an argument for those inclusions making the world feel smaller, but another for those cameos imbuing this film with a stronger through line. So I'm kinda cool with either. Success! Second, the narrative we just explored is in chronological order. That order being Genesis, The Children, Death Walking, and The Swordslinger. I interpret that as an arc that starts dark before growing progressively brighter. But I could see an artistic argument for storytelling in reverse. What do you guys think of that? It would fundamentally change the vibes of the movie and leave things on a much grimmer note than what I had in mind. But I can see how that could appeal to some people who aren't as interested in optimism. Either way, I leave that up to you. We're navigating a realm of possibility here, so whatever thread you pick is yours to hold dear. As for my thread, though, that's all for this one. Like and subscribe because I've got more rewrites, fixes, essays, and whatnot in the works. And speaking of, for my next rewrite... Until then, though, cheers.